My background is in building brands, scaling brands in the way people feel about them, but also the numbers of people that adopt their products. But in a brand world where you're trying to get people to think differently, your data points are slightly less rigid.
They're struggling to hire great people because the great people can tell they don't care.
That's brand. That really is brand. That's your reputation. Ultimately, brand is what people think of your business. When you're really involved in the context, then you really understand their problem and the challenges and the targets they're facing. And then natural collaboration happens a lot quicker. But that's how critical I believe having a purpose which sits behind a problem is, because the focus it gives you and the efficiency it gives you. I'm James Peach. My parents weren't aware of the Roald Dahl book that they named me. That's probably something I should call out at the top. But I'm from near Leicester in the Midlands, and my background is in brand marketing. So I was part of an early team of a little fruit juice company called Innocent many years ago, before the world really knew what smoothies were, and was part of the team that scaled Innocent across the UK and across Europe. Then joined a company called Uber in its early stages of launching in London, and was part of the team that grew and scaled that company across the UK and into Europe. And also more recently, I've been global director of brand at another marketplace business called Vinted, a secondhand clothing platform, scaling that from only a few markets in Europe to now 21 markets across Europe and North America. So my background is in building brands, scaling brands, both in the way people feel about them, but also the numbers of people that adopt their products. And so that's my sort of business career. And then I accidentally have created an adventure career by mistake, where I've hiked across a couple of continents. I started the first triathlon of the UK, where we cycled the length, kite the width, and climbed the height non-stop. And then that led ultimately to me spending 2 years cycling around the world on a bicycle, unsupported. I've got a pretty interesting business career where I've been at an interesting stage of household brands, and then this other bit on the other side there, where I've been walking across deserts and whatnot. But that's sort of me encapsulated into what I've done so far in my life.
We're going to dive into all of this, but you said brand marketing. So when you define the thing that you do and the impact it has, that you call brand marketing, what is it?
One of the problems with marketing, and certainly with brand marketing, is that it is often unclarified. And you can look at loads of different books and they'll tell you loads of different definitions. To me, brand marketing is about solving problems. Often marketing gets pulled into growth these days, and that's more of a sort of channel specific thing about growing businesses. But brand marketing is more about solving issues. Those issues could be growth related, but they could also be reputation related. They're ultimately trying to affect the way someone thinks in order to create a result. So you're trying to affect the way someone thinks. So maybe they think you're a great business instead of an evil business. Maybe they understand your product better, and so they have more chance they'll pick it up next time they're at the fixture. So ultimately, that's what you're constantly trying to do, is affect the way people think, and so they will have a different impression of you. And like generally, the term brand means you're doing it in an emotional way. You're generally trying to affect them emotionally.
And from your perspective, is it measurable?
Yeah. So the foundational difficulty of my career, or anyone's career who works or has led in a brand team, is attribution, is measuring brand. If you go and buy a product, we can measure that. We can measure EPOS sales. It's an app. We can measure conversion. We can totally understand 1 + 1 = 2. But in a brand world where you're trying to get people to think differently, your data points are slightly less rigid. And so we use a lot of surveying. Like nearly all brands are built on surveying, understand how people perceive the brand, whether they love it, whether they hate it, whether they recommend it to a friend, whether the attributions of taste are coming through, or whatever that product, depending on what the product might be. But ultimately, you're asking people through survey the whole time. And that's never going to be as robust as you purchase a product, tick, we've sold one product. So yeah, it's definitely measurable, but the measures end up being more trend-based, looking at how things change over time, rather than looking at things in the moment. How many did we sell today? We don't have that sort of live data available to us in brand like sales teams do. But that is changing, of course.
Is it only applicable in B2C? I don't see it a lot in B2B. I see the B2B marketing in particular being still very features, like it'd be like saying buy a BMW because look, we've got the best shock absorbers, which is not what they say at all.
I would argue it's as important in B2B as it is in B2C. Yes, in B2B, you are talking more about maybe features and benefits rather than trying to lean into emotion. But like the tenets of brand are still really important. As a really crass, like low level example, LinkedIn profiles. You jump on LinkedIn profiles, like they are your brand. Everything that people see is your brand. And so if your B2B company, all your employees have rubbish LinkedIn profiles that don't represent the business well, then that's brand. That really is brand. That's your reputation. Ultimately, brand is what people think of your business. When your employees are in the pub with their mates and they're talking about the culture at the company, that's brand. All of it is ultimately what people perceive. And so, yeah, it's all brand.
Messy LinkedIn profiles, I think, is a great example, because I'll speak to a CEO and they'll say, oh yeah, we're really struggling to hire great people. And then you go and look at the LinkedIn profiles of the senior team in this company and they're all inconsistent and shit. And you Google the company and no images of anybody having fun come up. And so you just go, this company doesn't care. They're struggling to hire great people because the great people can tell they don't care. And I think it's the equivalent of going into a restaurant toilet, because you know everything about a restaurant kitchen by visiting a restaurant toilet. It's that, isn't it? It's that, you go into the toilet and you go, oh, this is lovely. Somebody cares. Oh, I bet their kitchen's clean. You can't help but string these things together.
In a core brand world, we'd call that relevancy. Because you're there in front of a fixture with all these products and you go, which one of these is for me? Which one of these feels like it's for me? Looks like it's for me? And you're exactly the same with the business. Looking at those LinkedIn profiles or looking at that toilet in that restaurant, which one of these is for me? Do I relate to those people in that LinkedIn? This website doesn't have anyone having fun on it. That's not for me. So it's like, is it relevant to me? Can I relate to it? It's exactly the same.
Do you then end up in conflict with your marketing colleagues who are spending the advertising budget? And you're saying, like, nobody'd be clicking on these ads if it wasn't for the brand work, and they're going, fuck your brand, it's because we're spending all this money on Meta and Google. Is that it seems like it's into Nissan warfare in marketing, where normally it's between sales and marketing. But, I could see there's a challenge for who's actually making the biggest difference.
Dom, if I could tell you the amount of founders and CEOs I've spoken to who say, my growth team and my brand team aren't getting on, James. Have you got any ideas? If I had £1, I'd be a very, very wealthy man and would be doing this call from a yacht. But it is a natural challenge of businesses, because these two teams have different objectives and solve problems in different ways. But also they're heavily reliant on each other. A growth team needs its creative often from a brand team, but brand team has got different priorities. And so there's a healthy tension, or often to some degree in some businesses less healthy, where that relationship can be really stretched, and is for some of the businesses I've worked in. What you generally find in a growth team, they work in verticals, and so you've got someone who's in CRM or someone who's in paid advertising or whatever that may be, and they've got strict targets they're trying to hit, and what stops them from hitting those targets is the brand team, is their reliance on the brand team. So that's where that sort of comes in, different objectives. Then you've got a brand team, which is generally set up horizontally, where they're channel agnostic and they're just trying to solve problems. So let's try and solve this problem. And then what's the right channel to do it in? And so you've got vertical and horizontal methods trying to work together that will rely on each other, but have different objectives. It's a really challenging setup for most, if not all, businesses.
Do you have any tips at all?
The amount of times you see a business that simply aren't, I'm going to say the word collaboration, and I hate it because it's such an obvious business term to use, but that aren't taking each other on the journey well enough, that aren't sitting in each other's meetings, that aren't really understanding the pressures of each other team. Because when you understand the context, when you're really involved in the context, then you really understand their problem and the challenges and the targets they're facing. And then natural collaboration happens a lot quicker. So getting people into meetings you wouldn't naturally think they should be in, just so they can learn and understand each other's context, is the basics. Some of the key learnings and takeaways from the business I've helped to scale, I mean, they're really interesting, the three businesses. So if you look at Uber, Vinted, and Innocent, they've been hyper successful in completely different ways. One thing that is consistent across the three of them is a total obsession with the customer. Obsession with the customer. Three really different ways. Vinted is all about the moment of purchase and becoming the most efficient company it can possibly be in order to make that transaction moment as cheap as it possibly can be. They own their own servers, they're making their own payment systems, they own their own supply, and that's how they're obsessed with the customer. They're giving the customer the best possible deal they can make. Uber, obsessed with the customer. They're making it as easy as possible for the customer to get a taxi or to get food delivered to their home. They introduced surge pricing, which surge pricing means, and it's really annoying because it means it's more expensive, but it does mean that all of the taxis come towards you, which gets you home quicker. They're obsessed with that, getting you home as quick as they possibly can. And Innocent, they're obsessed with serving your needs as an individual and making sure they are creating the best possible brand experience and product experience that is the healthiest, et cetera, et cetera. And so 3 completely different ways of being obsessed with a customer, but all of them totally obsessed. And I think that's like, if I were to start a business tomorrow, that's what I would think about. How am I obsessed with the customer? What is it that's unique about what I'm going to bring to a customer that maybe other competitors or not necessarily competitors, because it's not always great to just think about competitors, but what's unique about how I'm serving the customer?
And therefore also a narrow definition of customer?
To some extent, it is a narrow definition of customer. I think maybe the place to start is the problem you're solving. Again, with each of those businesses, and some of them do better than others, had an understanding of the actual problem they're solving and what their business is trying to achieve. Innocent was remarkable at this. Total focus on what the problem is they were solving and how they're going to solve it and what our roles are as individuals. I always think as a manager, as a leader, the most motivating thing you can give an employee is clarity. The single most motivating thing, even in front of bonuses and whatever, clarity of what their job is and what's expected of them. Innocent, amazing at that. Uber, broadly terrible. 15,000 employees across the world. In the same office in London, I found 2 people doing pretty much the same job who didn't even know each other. And they're working on a project. They both work on a project that they'd created themselves, but neither of them knew each other. That either of them were like crazy lack of efficiency and lack of direction. What is the business trying to solve and how are we going to get there? Vinted, similarly, when I joined, my team were really unhappy. Digging around in that, found that it was mostly because of the lack of clarity of what was expected of them, what their roles were. And so I ended up working with the CEO to understand what the problem the company's solving is. What is the vision? What's the ultimate vision for Vinted? And then how does that ladder back to the expectations? And it completely changed my team and ultimately really drove the business forward with this new sense of direction. And so I know we've talked about sort of how these companies approach the consumer, but when I talk about approaching the consumer, what I really mean is how they line up behind a problem. Some do it well, some do it poorly, and the worse you do it, the more unhappy the team and generally the more inefficient the operation.
Is the first thing you have to identify a chosen customer with a problem that is going to be worth solving? Is that where you start, or do you have to start with a purpose and like a why?
It's a really good question. And I think both are relevant because you can start from a why and that will bring you to a problem, or you can start with a problem and then retrofit a why. One of the beefs my girlfriend has with me, among many, is that
you fucked off for 2 years around the world on a bike.
I said, yeah.
I think there might be something in that.
That's right at the top. If she says, "Oh, I think this is a good business idea," I'll immediately give 10 reasons why it's not. And that's because she's starting with what she sees as a problem and solving it. And my natural position is to start from a place of purpose and what my purpose is. And so I go into, and so I see her logic and want to fight it with purpose. And so I think your challenge is a really good one. And I think different people approach it from different points, but I think both are really, really critically important. And we've talked about Uber, Vinted, Innocent. I want to make clear that this is relevant for every single business on planet Earth, no matter the size or scale. I have a speaking business, which is just me. I have this. I've written out the problem. I've written out my vision and my purpose mission, which are sort of interchangeable. And then my objectives of my little speaking company, employees number 1, this one, but that's how critical I believe having a purpose which sits behind a problem is, because the focus it gives you and the efficiency it gives you.
Let me interrupt the conversation just for a minute because I don't want you to miss this. My new book, Mind Your Fucking Business, is out on Amazon. If you're thinking yet another business book, I think you're wrong. This is actually a blueprint to cutting through the noise and achieving unparalleled success for you. It's based on 10 years of business coaching, spotting similar problems that people have had and coming up with real world solutions. If it's supercharging sales, if it's mastering talent acquisition, building a powerhouse brand, cultivating a company culture that breeds success, then this book is a ticket to your transformative journey. It's filled with practical tools and frameworks that I use every single day with my clients as part of their coaching program. If you want to take your business from good to great, look, you can go to Amazon and you can buy it, or you can click the link in the show notes and head over to monkhouseandcompany.com. I'll send it to you today. I'll send you a copy for free. I want to help you build a fantastic business. Now, back to the conversation.
I don't think people come to work, employees don't come to work to do a shit job. You know, I go back to the Gallup Q12, and the first question in the Gallup Q12 is, I know what's expected of me at work. And it's a pyramid. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs for staff happiness. And so if you don't know what your expectations are, you don't know whether you had a good day or not. It's just sort of like working in the dark. Like you've got no option other than to do 9 to 5 and go home and go, did I make a difference? I don't know. And you just, God, that's so fucking depressing. But most people, I think, are in jobs exactly like that, where they don't know if the work they did is making a difference, and they don't know whether they did it well or not. Well, actually, they think they did it well, because in other studies, all the people who are below average without any measurement thought they were above average, because otherwise they'd have thought they were shit, and the human brain stops you thinking that without any objective measure. But most people aren't in companies with a purpose and have no sense, have no expectations of them, and sort of bumble along.
I presume because they don't understand the value of it. But I'm so lucky. I've had such a privileged base to my career. I'd spent 7 years at Innocent, which wasn't a graduate scheme, but pretty much was, and took me on this wonderful journey and showed me how a great business operates. And then I left it and started looking into other businesses. I was like, oh, not everyone's like this. And I'm like, like this is one of the best ones. All these businesses are so disorganized, so inefficient, so much lack of clarity of what's expected of employees. And it's a real shock because early in my career I've been so privileged. And taking a day to just codify what the business is doing and share that with employees is so incredibly valuable. What you've talked about in terms of needs there, Dom, is bang on. But also there's an inspiration element, as in if you are solving this greater problem, whatever it is, how big or small it is, and you're able to ladder that all the way down to what the employee is doing that week or that month, then the employee can see not just that the business is solving the problem, but their efforts every day are solving this issue. And whether this issue is, saving the world or climate change or just business growth or, finding a different way for, solving tiny problems, it doesn't really matter. But the motivation an employee can get from that line of sight is huge. So yeah, it really was a shock to me when I went into the normal business world away from the cuddly beanbags and table tennis tables of Innocent drinks.
What did you do in that 7 years? You're there riding a wave of this business is going up. And so, when you arrived and you ended up with this job of head of brand at Innocent, right? It was probably quite a small job at the beginning and you had no experience. And by the end, you've been doing it for 7 years. But did you take on any formal education? Did you read a load of books? Did you take courses? Did you do anything else to sort of solidify that so that you were then in a position to move to Uber and then Vinted? Or was it just, I've learned it on the job, that's good enough?
I moved around a lot, and I was really lucky that Innocent had a culture where they were open to moving people from role to role. And so I started in a commercial role and then moved into a sort of hybrid commercial role, which was product marketing. Ultimately, Innocent at the time had 4 product markets. And then I moved into a more sort of group brand role where I was a senior brand manager. That was amazing because you're learning the commercials, you're learning a P&L, you're learning product market fit, you're learning that world. But then I moved into the more brand world of social media and PR and thinking about, how the brand is perceived and what's important from that side. So one thing is moving around, and that's especially early stage in your career, it's a very obvious thing to say, but the more you can move, the more you can learn. Innocent also, again, I was hugely privileged to be there because they were, and this is some years ago now, this is, 2010 to 2017 sort of time, where people in culture and having headcount that was just about learning and development internally, was still sort of early stages. And we had a big learning and development team that did a lot of leadership coaching and a lot of management coaching. And then lastly, an important thing to say is, and it's really interesting within the FMCG world, is they do learn from each other. Businesses really talk to each other and really learn from the challenges each of the businesses face. Even businesses, because I work in some food and drink businesses now, I'm amazed how much businesses in the same category, fighting for customers on the same shelf, still chat, still share learnings, and still there is a sort of culture of all in it together. So a lot of the sort of culture of Innocent, of moving people around and getting different experiences, there's a lot from learning and development, which includes, I remember reading Good to Great. I remember reading a lot of sort of the important leadership books, the long and short of it, and these important sort of fundamentals at Innocent. So there's a lot of on-the-job training, and then there's a lot of talking to other businesses.
Fab. Now, Uber, you were there at a tough time.
Uber was a genius idea, and the only way it was going to be successful was if it scaled as quickly as it possibly could. If it got to a size where it was too big to be banned, and that was a phrase, too big to be banned. Not a phrase from Uber, sorry, but a phrase now, is that it launched the market, scaled so quickly, was so attractive to riders and drivers who were getting cheap taxis for the first time, drivers who were earning more than they'd earned before. It scaled so quickly that it got too big for regulators to ban it or to work out what to do, which is why they were setting taxis on fire in Paris, why my boss's boss was put in jail for 48 hours, why we lost our license to operate in London, the most profitable city in the world at the time for Uber, 2 years in a row, whilst I was there. So we were putting out fires all the time. Susan Fowler wrote a blog, which was part of the Me Too movement, about how she was treated as a engineer in San Francisco. Our CEOs being caught screaming and shouting at Uber drivers, like all of these things are going wrong. And it was a really interesting brand challenge because a lot of this is coming over the Atlantic to the UK, but people like my mum are reading the newspaper, reading these things about Uber and just thinking, well, this is obviously a bad business. And so we're having to try and scale this app in a context of most weeks negative press is being written about. So people sort of love the product but hate the company. And I'm sure people can relate to that in many of the companies in the world. But one of the really interesting things for me as an employee is I'd come from Innocent, again, wonderful, loving world of this great brand. Good work was celebrated, deep work was celebrated. We'd spent a lot of time getting accurate and doing great work. But it would take time. To the tech world where the quality of the work no longer mattered. It was all about the speed. And that was a real shock. In FMCG, it takes a year, maybe 2 years to launch a new product. In technology, it takes a week. And so this change in getting the quality versus the speed was really dramatic and a big rush. And at Innocent, we had a real problem when the Daily Mail wrote about there's as much sugar in one of our smoothies as 3.5 Krispy Kreme donuts. It followed us for years, and people would repost it after social posts, and this followed us for years. At Uber, that was just a Monday morning that someone had been kicked out of an Uber or hit by an Uber or some terrible thing. That was just every month. We would clickbait. People loved reading about this company with all these challenges. So a weird and wonderful experience. I went out to San Francisco for Uberversity, which was a real thing. We were sent out there for a week to learn all there is about Uber, about a week into my time there. We're there with Travis Kalanick, the CEO and founder at the time, obviously no longer part of the organization. He answers lots of questions of all these 200 odd new people at the business. And some people challenged him quite openly, and he sort of suggested he was going to fire them on the spot, but that, he was his own character. And then as we walked back to the office, I was lucky enough to be at the front and to be walking with Travis Kalanick and chatting to him. And as we got closer to the office, it was clear that there was lots of people outside the front of it. And there's a protest, and quite a loud, noisy protest of thousands of people out the front of this office. And I said to Travis, I said, what's this for? And he says, it's for me. And we ended up having to get in an Uber that would take us around the back of the office and go in the back entrance and up the back stairs because there was a massive protest against Travis Kalanick. And that was on the first day of my second week at the company. It was a real introduction to what I would uncover in my time there.
So speed is important. In their case, from an economic perspective, market share is important. What else did you take from Uber that has served you at Vinted or the other businesses you now work at or advise?
Always the most difficult jobs, the ones you learn the most from. And I learned innocent where things are structured and really thought through. And Uber, it was, we've employed you because we believe, I think I was one of the first brand employees in Europe or in EMEA. And we've employed you because we know you're good at your job. Off you go. Described it as a buffet. Like you have a buffet of opportunity. You've just got to work out what you want to eat first. And you put the business plan together, you spot the problem, put the business plan together, get the money approved, and off you go. And that's an extraordinary privilege in your career to have that opportunity. Similarly, I'm very lucky. Similarly, I had it at Vinted as well. That wasn't just an experience. That was something I learned because the confidence to go and do that, to just sit at a desk and go, instead of going, what's the next thing I need to do for my one-to-one for my manager, sit there like a managing director or a CEO and go, right, what's the best thing I can do for this business? Like where could I take this role? Where could I take this brand? And then make that decision go, right, from what I've worked out, I think this is the best thing next to do for this massive global enterprise. And so you go and do it. And off you go. And people go, yeah, that sounds logical. Yeah, put together a story. Yeah, Lisa. Yeah, okay, that seems like a logical, objective strategy you've got there. Off you pop. And that's a real change in career from being in the back office to being the front office of your own career. And that was a massive learning for me. And it takes tons of confidence because you've got to have confidence in your own ability and your own ability to your own intelligence and your own experience, because ultimately that's all we've got. But do you know what? It was a big learning from that is you always think the management know exactly what they're doing. I got to Uber and realized, they don't. They don't. The leadership don't know what they're doing. They're using experience and common sense to make the best decisions they possibly can. But that's it. They don't have some wild thing that no one else has. And I really learned that at Uber. And you're like, I'm part of this now. I've got to use experience, common sense to make the best possible decisions to grow my role in this business. And it's a real turning point for me.
I think it's interesting because they got lucky hiring you because people with high agency are rare. And most of the time, particularly, has somebody done the job before is a thing, tick. Are they not a dick? Tick. But then there's do they have agency? So often lots of people that they could have hired, which on paper would have looked like they could have done the job, would have sat there and gone, nobody's told me what to do. And nobody's going to complain if I do nothing. And, months later would still be sitting there, playing solitaire, wondering at any point, is anyone going to fire them or tell them what to do? There's that sort of entrepreneurial flair that you obviously have, or that high agency that you have, that means you revel in that type of startup minefield. Because
I was pushed into it. It's not I don't think it's my natural place because I was pushed into it. I have two superpowers. One of my superpowers is determination. And my second superpower is, I don't know the right term, but it's like copycatting. As in, I quickly see what people are doing and I think that's a good thing. I need that and I take it. And at Uber, I was copycatting all the time. It was full of very bright young people from the States, young people from Brazil, young people from all over the world that were employed by Uber. They wanted to come over to London. They were had Harvards and Yales and all of this sort of stuff. They were super bright. And I saw their confidence. I saw their agency and their entrepreneurial spirit. And they didn't have the shackles of a slow-moving FMCG company with lots of processes. They were just at Uber there to just let their career fly. And I saw that and I copied it. And I copied the language they were using and I copied the way they behaved and the way they interacted. And so whatever the reason they hired me, I couldn't tell you, but the agency, because I was pushed into it and it became natural to me when I realized I could do it.
Okay. So why did you then spend 2 years cycling around the world. Now, obviously, one of your superpowers is that sort of you can put up with personal misery, which must be shared by your girlfriend, because she's been putting up with you and going around the world for 2 years. But why did you go around the world? Why did you decide to do that?
I was always looking for the next thing. And I like putting myself through an amount of like challenge.
How unhappy can I make myself?
I mean, I'm the youngest of three boys. I'm naturally trying to prove myself, as you know, as is the psychology of families and individuals. And I, the start this year, I left my mum's on Boxing Day and flew off to Costa Rica and walked solo from the Caribbean coast to the Pacific Ocean. So swam in the Caribbean and then maybe 5 weeks later swam in the Pacific. There's no path. There was no way of getting there. I just wanted to do this thing, and it was miserable. I was utterly miserable, so much of it. And I was there, in a waterproof sheet, rolled up on the floor of a jungle alone in the middle of Nicaragua in the rain, utter misery at the age of 40, thinking, what the hell are you doing?
And talking to locals who say, why are you here? And you go, I've no fucking idea. I'm just sort of being miserable, walking through your miserable village.
I mean, the correct answer is probably, I'm still trying to work that out. Like, I'm still trying to work out that's why I'm here, to try and work out why I'm here. But to answer your question around cycling around the world, like I felt when I left university, I started this triathlon of the UK, and then I did some bits and bobs of adventure. As I was always looking for the next thing, and it's the perfect mix of someone who likes to challenge themselves, sort of mentally, and get in difficult challenge themselves. I was about to say get in difficult situations, but yeah, and wanderlust. And I have a thing where I have a difficult relationship with time. I'm sort of hyper aware of the amount of time I have in life, and I try and fill it. And I really felt this as a younger man. I felt like, there's a start, middle, and end to life. And I want to get I made myself a poster at university, which was this cup, and it said, fill your cup right up. And I made it myself. That was how I lived in my 20s, was trying to fill this cup right up to the top, which is exhausting. But it meant I was always looking for this next thing. And then a friend of mine started a business called Escape the City, which I helped him with some of the marketing and events for. And they had an adventurer come called Alistair Humphreys, who had cycled parts of the world. And he spoke through his experience. And I was like, that's it. That's the one I've been looking for. I was always looking for the next one. This is the next one. And then it took me 6, 7, 8 years to get the confidence, the money, but mostly the confidence to do it. Every weekend I would dream about it and think about it, but to actually push yourself to leave your job, to tell your family, to pack your stuff away, and to actually sit on a bike, wave goodbye to your loved ones, and just start cycling, having made this promise that you're going to cycle around the world, is a really vulnerable experience. But the pressure of me filling up my time was enough to push me into that. And so that's ultimately why I went and did it.
Having heard you talk about it, the things that I remember most and tickled me the most were the stories of how miserable you were, particularly the bridge, I think in Bangladesh, wasn't it?
It was a bridge in Bangladesh. Yeah, I cycled almost 2 weeks to a bridge in Bangladesh that didn't exist. And so turn around, cycle back. Luckily, I mean, it added I had to cycle down the river and ultimately find a new bridge, which took, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. But those things happen all the time. And we talk about like resilience, bouncing back and bouncing forward. They talk about in the business language, but ultimately, every day cycling around the world, you are faced with things going wrong, and the only person who's in charge of that is you. And you trying to decide whether to turn right or left or whatever it is. And also, we're talking about a time sort of 7, 8 years ago now where Google Maps wasn't quite as good. There wasn't actually that. I didn't take that much tech with me in terms of cycle tech. I wasn't really interested in cycling. I was interested in exploration, and a bike was the best speed to do it. Walking's too slow, driving's too fast. This was the best speed to see the world. And I was also interested in purity. I didn't want to be uploading things to Instagram and having people follow. This is about my experience. And so for those reasons, like you might say, oh, why didn't you see on Google that the bridge didn't exist because I didn't really check.
That's changed my perspective on the incident completely, because now it's like, it didn't actually matter that the bridge wasn't there. And if you spend 2 years cycling around the world, 4 days is really not a big deal. And
No.
it's just a totally different perspective on that. Also thinking Nevada was flat is similarly explained, because you just don't care.
Well, I cared more for that one. I mean, I was in Turkmenistan and in a hot desert, and that road just at one moment just came to an end. The tarmac stopped and it became sand. I remember crying quite a lot just through frustration. And then you get back on the bike, turn around and go back. I can't cycle through sand for however long this may be. I will perish. And the story of Nevada there is the challenge. I had an amazing time in the Kansas desert crossing the state because it was flat and it was sunny and it was just really easy cycling, especially in the evening when the wind would drop. And then I had a terrible time going through the Rocky Mountains and through the Utah Canyonlands, where my knees started swelling up and my bike broke and it was freezing cold. And I kept thinking, oh, don't worry, the Nevada desert's next, and kept saying, oh, don't worry, the Nevada desert, you'll be there soon. And ended up, when we actually got to the Nevada desert, it turns out it was more cold and more mountainous. Nevada desert is one of the most mountainous states in the US. And I just didn't know this. I hadn't done any of this research. And so I'd been putting all my chips on this bet that the Nevada desert was going to solve all my problems. And if anything, it made them all worse.
Oh, just fabulous. Thank you for sharing that again. The arrival fallacy. It'll be all right when. I think that's the thing that I see people do that all the time. Oh, we're hiring a new CEO, or we're hiring a new head of sales, or we're about to launch a campaign, and it is, all your chips are on this future thing, and then it doesn't quite turn out and you're disappointed.
It's such a natural thing. It's not just businesses. It's such a natural thing for humans to fantasize about how things will be in the future. We do it all the time. Our brains are wired for fantasy, for storytelling inside our heads. But it is, in a business context, it's a really dangerous thing to do, instead of looking at what you can do now, what you can change today.
James, just as we finish, what you mentioned Good to Great as one of the sort of business books you've read, but you got any other maybe 3 books that you think people that have impacted you and that people might want to pick up and read? Yeah,
I mean, I do. And a fault of me is that I'm not a proactive business book reader. I'm a reactive business book reader. And so when I have a challenge, I go to business books. And I've had challenges around businesses, communication, and on a number of times. And I've found Radical Candor, Kim Scott, Vinted are a great example of this within their culture. Small businesses I've worked with, are terrible examples, but have used this book to really improve the way they interact with each other. I think that's a real fundamental. Challenges I've had when I've worked for businesses that have been around for a long time and had employees, low labor turnover, and have employees there right from the start. I think it's what got us here won't get us there. But also, I look elsewhere, and like leadership lessons are found all over the place. And I think When the Dust Settles by Lucy Eastle, about her role in disaster management around the world, the leadership lessons in that are on every single page. So there's some more reactive, some are more proactive, but I think those are pretty good places to look.
Brilliant. James, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us this morning.
What an absolute pleasure, a privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you.